Welcome to the Business of Apparel podcast. This is the place to learn how to start and scale your own apparel brand and fill it with loyal customers for years to come. I'm your host, Rachel Erickson, owner and CEO of Unmarked Street, and I can't wait to share this episode with you. Welcome back to the Business of Apparel podcast, where today we're going to talk all about SKU rationalization. And holy cow, I can't believe I haven't done a solo episode on SKU rationalization yet because it's my favorite thing to talk about. If you've come to any of our free workshops or you've been following me on social media, you know that I love to talk all about SKU rationalization. And a lot of people have kind of mentioned to me that this is the thing that scares them about coming to work with us here at the Business of Apparel. People have been really open and honest that when I talk about SKU rationalization and use that kind of industry jargon and lingo, it makes them go, oh, this is not the place for me because I'm not advanced enough yet of a brand. I am not going to be able to pay for someone who's able to talk about this kind of stuff at this level. And I want you to know that SKU rationalization is not a foreign concept. It is not a very elevated concept. It's something that you've actually been hearing about on a regular basis from everybody else in this space. They're just not using this industry term. And so let me break it down for you first, really, really quick, and then we'll dive into this concept. So SKU rationalization, very, very simply, is rationalizing the reason for you to have every single SKU in your product line. There is a logical, rational reason for you to need certain SKUs in your line. And then there is a logical, rational reason for you to not need certain SKUs in your line. And that's all that this is. We're taking a look at all of your different SKUs. Now, SKU stands for stock keeping unit. It's SKU. And if you're in the industry already, you're probably very, very familiar with needing to have SKU numbers on your products. A SKU number will stand for the product itself, the colorway that you're offering it in, and the size that you're offering it in. So those three things make up a very specific number that is in your back-end system to be able to track your inventory. And if you don't have SKU numbers yet within your system, maybe you're building in Shopify. If you don't have SKU numbers associated with all of your different items, this is maybe a great time for you to consider adding this numbering system to your backend system. This is how all of the big brands work. And so what we end up doing is assigning a SKU number, which is an internal number that means something to you and your company. Again, you can use different abbreviations or you can use different ways to indicate that style, colorway, size combination. And it's something that you should come up with and standardize and then use over and over and over again inside your business. It will go hand in hand with your UPC code. And your UPC code is going to then indicate that barcode that gets put on a sticker, either on your bag that you're shipping it in or on your hang tag that you're putting on your garment. And so if someone from a wholesaler ends up buying your item, they can scan that barcode, know exactly what that item is, and then track their back-end inventory. So if you have an apparel product line, you have SKUs, whether you know it or not, you have SKUs. These are your products. These are your style, color, size specific products. Okay. So now we are going to be rationalizing the reason for each of them to be there. And this is a really, really emotional, tough process for a lot of different brands. Sitting in a room with your team, or even if you are your only team, let's say you're a solo entrepreneur, you're out here getting your apparel line out in the world all on your own, sitting down and really rationalizing the reason that you've put certain products out into the market for your target customer can be really challenging. I've been in many rooms before where it gets pretty heated when we start talking about SKU rationalization. We're having a hard time getting the design team to understand why we as the business leadership team don't want to continue to carry certain SKUs because they're not pulling their weight. And so this is where the logic of it all comes in. We have to know our numbers and we have to know our numbers goals to be able to have these conversations with our teams or with ourselves to be able to make really tough decisions about our product line. Now, one way that you can really be making decisions is whether or not that product has a good margin. So I've talked about margins ad nauseum as well. We talk about margins all the time. I think if you have healthy, good margins in your business, you will have a healthy business. When we're watching different brands close down or really struggle with the tariffs right now, a lot of it is because they didn't have a healthy margin, so they can't absorb changes in the economy. If you started with a really short margin and you were just putting product out there at a high cost, but trying to sell it at a low retail, and you were taking that risk already, when the economy shifts and additional tariffs are added, you end up in a position where you're all of a sudden losing money on the products that you are trying to sell to your target customer. And so we don't want to see that. You want to set up your line plan, set up your margin goals, and set up all of your costing and all of your pricing. Now, those are two different things. Costing is what I actually consider the cost that you get from your factory. Your pricing is what you're selling it for. So your costing and your pricing need to be set up so that you have a healthy margin. And if you're selling direct to consumer, again, I know I talk about this all the time and you're sick of hearing it maybe, but if you're selling direct to consumer, you want to be aiming for anywhere from 65% to 75% product margins. If you're selling to wholesale, so let's say you're selling to Macy's and then Macy's is selling to the customer, you want to sell to Macy's at a 50% product margin. And when you sit down to do the SKU rationalization process and you sort through all of your data, when you find items that are at a really low margin and aren't hitting the thresholds that you need, this is the process where you need to make tough decisions to potentially remove those from your line or change them so that you can have healthier margins in your business. So SKU rationalization is not very scary, but it is, when you hear from different people online saying, start small, you need to have a smaller product line. Your target customers will appreciate a smaller product line. Don't grow too fast. All of those bits of advice are very valid, but very few people actually talk about why. This is the why. We're going to talk about the why today of that, okay? So SKU rationalization is the 80-20 rule in the apparel world all day long. And what is the 80-20 rule? The 80-20 rule in its most basic form says that 80% of your wins, 80% of your profit, 80% of your revenue is probably coming from only 20% of your effort. So I'm going to say that again, because sometimes it's a hard concept. When I read the 80-20 rule way back, it was really hard for me to kind of understand this because it sounds so bonkers, right? 80% of the good coming into your business is probably only coming from 20% of your effort. 20% of what you are doing on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis is leading to 80% of your business's success. And when we run SKU rationalization processes for our clients or inside huge, big billion-dollar companies, we find the 80-20 rule applies. What we tend to find is that about 20% of your product line is bringing in 80% or more of your revenue. Okay, I'm going to say that again too. Only 20% of your product line is probably bringing in 80% or more of your revenue. And then let's flip that on its head, right? There's 80% of your product line, most likely, that is only doing 20% of your bottom line revenue. So let's say you're working 5 days a week, right? Like, let's just make that super simple. You're working 5 days a week. 4 days of that whole week, the work that you're doing is only bringing in a fifth of your revenue. Think about that when it comes to time and when it comes to revenue. That is not balanced. That is not balanced at all. And so the SKU rationalization process is meant to help us rebalance our workload, our time, and our revenue so that we can start to remove the portion of that 80% that is not well contributing to our bottom line so that we can stop working on those different products. We can remove them from needing to buy inventory of them. All of a sudden, we free up cash flow inside of our business. We also tend to see teams be much happier after a SKU rationalization process because a portion of their workload was just immediately taken away and now their time is so much freer. They get to dedicate their time to the 20% of the product line that is actually moving the needle. So how do we run this process? First of all, I really really recommend that you run a SKU rationalization process for your product line at least once a year. And that's what we tend to do for our clients. And especially when we work for big billion-dollar companies, that's happening actually twice a year. So every time we kick off a major season, so either spring or fall, we are running a SKU rationalization process to figure out what from the previous year or the previous line should we carry over into the new line because it's being successful, and what items do we need to drop or remove because their margins are low, our customers don't like them, we're not selling them through, there's something about them that is not actually lending itself to our bottom line. So when we do this, we start looking at data first. And so this is where you need to have some clean data in your system. And this has been coming up quite a bit in our annual membership calls recently, where we've been talking a lot about Shopify and the back end of it. And something that came up recently was me giving a lot of advice about setting standards up front for how you set up your data in your selling system. So I'm going to give you a couple different examples. We've done SKU rationalization processes for quite a few of our clients. 2 clients come to mind very, very specifically who had really messy data in their back end. And it took us an additional 2 months just to clean it up before we could even do our SKU rationalization process. And neither of these clients had understood that setting up a very standard way of naming your products in the backend system was going to then lend itself to what you can pull out as a report, right? Like if you're in Shopify and you hit the export to Excel button and you're looking at an Excel spreadsheet of all of your data, maybe you're looking at all of your sales data, which is what we're going to look at when we do a SKU rationalization process. We are going to find that if you didn't set up your naming structure right, you are going to have several different lines for the exact same product. So for example, we would see women's black dress medium. We would see women's medium black dress. We would see women's dress black medium, women's dress medium black. And all 4 of those were indicating the exact same product. So what we had to do with both of these clients, this was the same issue that they both had, where they were not consistently naming things in their back end, almost in the exact same way that I just described. And so what we had to do was go in and advise a standard naming way. So now we are going to name everything the women's dress black medium, because we want to do style, color, size. Style, color, size. And if you want to do it differently, that's totally fine. You can do color, style, size, or whatever it is that makes the most sense for your business. But I really recommend that you go kind of in that hierarchy. And then you want to have, if you're adding genders, so let's say you have unisex, women's, and men's. So it goes gender, style, colorway, size. Gender, style, colorway, size. And so now we have women's dress, black, medium. And we need to collect all of that data and then kind of pull it all together so that those 4 lines of data now become one. And that becomes really, really cumbersome. Like going through that data, scrubbing it on an Excel spreadsheet and making sure that it's all accurate and correct before we start doing our SKU rationalization process can be really time consuming. So if you are just now starting out and you're thinking about getting yourself into Shopify to put your inventory in there, I really recommend that you set that standard now and never change it. You want to make sure that you are always naming things the same way. So let's say this season you have women's dress black medium. If you are carrying that style over into a new season and you need to somehow put it into the system in a different line or in a different area, you want to use that exact same naming structure so that even if it pulls a different line, we at least see the exact same names together so that when we sort the data, they all sit together really pretty on a spreadsheet. So that's number 1, my recommendation to you, so that when you get to the SKU rationalization process for your brand, it is very easy to pull a report from your backend system, sort it for data, and then we can go ahead right into our SKU rationalization process. Are you sick of being stuck on the sidelines of the apparel industry and you just want to be put in the game? Then join our 100% free workshop, Secrets Behind Billion-Dollar Apparel Brands, and learn the strategies, tactics, and secrets used by the most successful companies in the world. We'll cover everything from setting your brand standards to big brand line planning and executive level processes. In this workshop, you're going to learn how to name your target customer, rationalize your line, calculate product margins, roll up your revenue, and see potential profits while figuring out how to build a unique calendar for your brand. You're going to learn that and so much more. Are you ready to take your apparel business to the next level? Sign up today and use code PODCAST for a 10% discount on the full Business of Apparel online course or any of our mini courses after the workshop. Visit www.thebusinessofapparel.com/secrets to register. Don't miss out. And once you do sort your data in a spreadsheet, the first thing that you're looking for is your top 20%. So you're going to look at this in two different ways. This is really crucial. You are going to look at it in gross revenue, and then you are going to look at it in unit number of sales. So how many units of this did I sell and how much money did I make? You're going to sort all the biggest items to the top. So you're going to go into your Excel spreadsheet. You are going to sort the columns. And then for your gross revenue, you're going to bring the number one items to the top. And then for your unit sales, you're going to bring those number one items to the top. And then you are going to scan that data to find out what is making up the top 80% of my revenue. And most times we find that it's 20% of your line or less. Now, we actually just went through this with a client of ours that we onboarded a few months ago. We went through a SKU rationalization process. We're looking at doing some FOB reduction work for them. And what we ended up finding was that their 80% of their business is being done with just two products. They have a huge product line. It's huge. They have massive amounts of SKUs. And two products, are bringing in 80% of their product line. And so now we're in the process of evaluating their entire rest of their product line to say, okay, what is actually valid to keep here? Because you guys could run basically this entire business off of maybe 5 products. And you would be in such good shape. And now we would just have to maintain 5 products. And that would be it. You could probably eliminate, not that this is what we want for them or their team, but you could probably eliminate headcount. You could probably not need so many people on staff to manage 5 different styles compared to the hundreds that you have. This is where we start to see that workload and revenue and your SKU count, they don't match up. When you're hiring an entire team of people to come in and manage hundreds of styles for you, and then find out that you could be running just as successful of a business with just 5 items, that tends to be a really big wake-up call. So what we're doing is we're trying to find those items that run your business. What are the items that keep the lights on at your office? What are the items that you should not or could not ever lose in your line because they're the items that you've become famous for? There's one of those items in their line that is 70% of their business. So when we talk about the other item, it's only 10% of their business, but that's how they make up the 80%. They could probably run their entire business off of the one item that they became famous for almost a decade ago. And people continue to come back to them for. They make tens of thousands of units of this one item. And when you look at it that way and think about the freedom that they could be giving their team or the freedom that they could be giving themselves as the CEO of that company, you start to wonder why you're putting in all of the additional effort to build out so much other product that isn't actually serving you or your bottom line or your business. Okay, so once you know what the top items are in your line, we're going to start to look at the bottom 80% of your line that is probably only doing about 20% of your gross revenue. And we're going to start to evaluate them one by one. And this is a painstaking process. This is not a fast process. SKU rationalization takes time. It's a lot of conversations with all the right people in the room. And then you want to start going line by line to rationalize logically why that piece is in the line. And again, this is what we're going through with our client right now. You have hundreds of pieces in this line. You really only need maybe 5 to run your business. Let's rationalize all of these other dozens and dozens of products to figure out why we have them. And a lot of the times we're finding when we're having these conversations with this client that it's really important for them to test with their target customer what comes next. What is the next big item that their target customer wants? So as we're digging into it more, we're finding that these things don't actually hit their bottom line so heavy because they're buying in short quantities to figure out if their customers love it. And if they get an item that ends up selling out in a week, or their customers want more of, or they get rave reviews, all of a sudden now we can put an additional purchase order in and order more of that item. For the items that don't sell through really fast, They never get ordered ever again. So this is a strategy that they're putting in place. But as we go through the SKU rationalization process with them, we are making them say in these meetings the reason for that test, the reason for that addition to the line. And does it make sense, especially if the margins are low for these items? We're having these deep conversations. And the answer, here's the trick to SKU rationalization. The answer is almost never to eliminate that entire 80% of your line that's only doing 20% of your business. Usually, a very, very successful SKU rationalization process, if you were to go through your entire line logically and you were able to eliminate as much as possible from your line to really free up your time, really free up your team's space, you would probably only be eliminating 40 to 50% of your product line. There is a very logical, rational reason for some of those items to be there. And I just gave you some examples with our client that we're working with right now, but other great reasons are for marketing. Let's say you came up with an idea that all of a sudden got featured in a bunch of magazines and a celebrity was seen wearing it or an athlete was seen wearing it. And all of a sudden, you can use that piece as leverage in your marketing, in your PR campaigns. This becomes another item that you can become famous for in a different way. That is a very logical, rational reason to keep that item in your line. And I've seen pieces like that in big, big companies where we take a huge short on those pieces. If we have a piece that celebrities are loving, influencers are loving, athletes are loving, and we even have like a 25% margin on it or worse, sometimes it's still worth it to keep it in the line as long as we can balance that out with better margins on all of our other products. So there is no one answer here. It absolutely has to be specific to you and your brand. And you have to be the CEO to make those hard decisions on every single line item. So that's how we do SKU rationalization. Let's also talk a little bit about the psychology behind SKU rationalization. Now, the book that I always reference when I'm doing webinars or workshops or anything about SKU rationalization is The Paradox of Choice by Barry Schwartz. It is an amazing book that breaks down so many different elements in our lives of where we have so many different choices to make. And it's really, really interesting. I used these two even before I read Barry Schwartz's book. And these two examples are actually in the book, which kind of blows my mind because it must be a very common experience, both of these things. But number one, when I go to the grocery store, right? When we go to the grocery store and find hundreds and hundreds of different bags of chips in the chip aisle, do you ever really browse the entire chip aisle for something new? Maybe you do. Maybe you take the time and you browse the entire chip aisle for something new to try. But you're probably in the mood at that point to try something new, right? You're looking for something to jazz it up, to change up like what's in your pantry. If I'm going through the chip aisle, I grab the same 2 or 3 things every single time that I'm there because I know it's what me and my family will eat. I know it's what we like. I know it's a staple maybe in my pantry. I'm not even looking at all of the other different choices. Barry Schwartz, in his book, The Paradox of Choice, talks a lot about the grocery store. And one of my favorite stories that I like to tell from The Paradox of Choice is the jelly story. And I tend to butcher this, so bear with me. If Barry Schwartz, if you're ever listening to this, I totally butcher this story. I'm so sorry. People should go read your book. And that would definitely be the best advice that I could give there. But basically, the story kind of goes, let's say Smucker's comes out with several new flavors that they want to test with their market, right? So they set up a table at the entrance to a grocery store and they've got 10 different jars of jelly out there. And they're giving away coupons. If you decide that you want to buy one of these new 10 different flavors, we'll give you a 10% off coupon for jelly. So in this first scenario, lots of people came up, they tasted a lot of different jelly, but very few people were actually taking coupons or buying any jelly. So Smucker's came back the next week and said, okay, these are our top 3. These are our top 3 jellies that we think would be great for our market. They put the 3 jars of jelly out, and now all of a sudden people were tasting just as many, but all of a sudden people were taking coupons. People were buying jelly. People were actually choosing a jelly that they actually liked. And the reason being that when you have 10 things or hundreds of things in front of you, it's really hard to decipher what your choice is there. Whereas if you have just a few items in front of you, it's really easy for you to understand what you don't like, what you maybe like a little bit, and which one you love. those become really, really easy decisions. And so the second example that I like to give, I don't know if you've ever gone into the Levi's store recently. I was in a Levi's outlet store. So this is a little bit of like an asterisk. We all know that the outlet stores tend to have a harder time making the floor sets look really, really pretty. But I went into a Levi's outlet. I was trying to find some new jeans. And what I ended up finding was that even if I found a jean that I liked or a pair of denim that I really liked, and I wanted to try on several in different washes so that I could figure out, okay, I want them in a light blue, I want them in a dark blue, I want them in a black. Maybe I want to buy some white jeans today. That ended up being really, really difficult because I could barely find them. There were so many different fits for me to try in this Levi's outlet store. And then when I did try them on, I found that even the different washes all fit differently. So it ended up becoming an all-day adventure to sort through all of this stuff. And I bet that most customers won't spend an entire day inside a Levi's outlet store trying to find just a few pair of jeans that they can take home with them. A very, very similar story is actually in the Paradox of Choices forward, where he's talking about going in to buy jeans. And it can be very, very cumbersome. And so what we tend to find is that in the apparel industry, Levi's is a great example. Let's say they were just to create a couple of different fits that they really stood for. They know that we need a slim fit, we need a straight fit, and we need a boot cut. I don't know. Everything changes with denim fits all the time. And right now I know we're kind of in a boyfriend fit phase. Skinny is out. I understand I'm a millennial and I'm still clinging to my skinny jeans. But if they were to define, these are the 3 fits that we really stand for. We're going to have them in a bunch of washes. We are going to dedicate our team's time to making sure that no matter what wash you pick up off of the shelf, it is going to fit the same, in the same size, in the same fit for you so that you can just pick them up and take them home. That would be a really great use of Levi's time so that they stop getting rid of all of the superfluous stuff that makes people walk into a store and then walk right back out because it's very overwhelming. Lululemon has a ton of different yoga tights. If I wanted to go find my perfect fit yoga tight inside Lululemon, it would probably take me an entire afternoon. I would have to be trying on a whole bunch of different pairs until I found the one that was quite right for me. Whereas if Lulu decided to say, hey, we're just going to stand for 2 different yoga tights. We dedicated all our time to making the 2 best yoga tights on the freaking planet. And if you're going to come in and buy these from us, we know that you're going to be satisfied. And then they dedicate their team's time to making sure that those are the best possible yoga tights that they could ever sell. All of a sudden that says something different to the customer. They can come in, they can try on 2 different pairs of yoga tights. Maybe they love both. They take both home in different colors. Maybe they love one, but all of a sudden it didn't take all afternoon to be digging through the huge assortment that is there. And I guarantee you that only 20% of Lulu's line or only 20% of Levi's line is probably doing about 80% of their business. And they could do away with quite a lot of those items and sell more because all of a sudden they have customers coming in willing to shop more, willing to try things on, willing to stay for maybe an hour, not an entire day. So now we've made the shopping process easy for our customer. We've indicated to them that we've put all of our effort, all of our value into these items that we are offering to you because this is a very curated line now. All of a sudden, our customer trusts that more. They become more loyal customers to us. These are the type of psychology things that happen when you do a SKU rationalization process and you decrease the size of your line to say, hey customer, hey target customer, we have really done a good job to make sure that we are only offering you the best of the best. So when you come in, you know that we've dedicated our time and our resources into these few items that we know are going to fit you well, that we know are high quality, and we know you are going to love them. You are going to want to come back and buy them from us over and over and over again. So a lot of our clients and a lot of our members, even in our annual membership right now, are asking a lot of questions about this because it's scary. It is really scary to go through your line and think, hey, I am making like $1,000 off of this piece. I'm willing to give that up in hopes that maybe I can get my other sales to go up too. That doesn't maybe make sense. Maybe that's a scary and a risky endeavor for you to take on. And I will say as entrepreneurs, we have to be willing to step into the unknown and to do things scared. every once in a while. There is science and logic and math and proof behind this process in all sorts of different ways. And you are hearing about it from so many different resources out on the internet. I promise you, every time you hear from somebody that you need to start small, you shouldn't be adding so much to your line, you need to decrease the size of your line, you need to up the quality, you need to work on your brand loyalty. What they are actually referring to is SKU rationalization. So now I hope you understand a little bit more about the behind the scenes process of how to do SKU rationalization and why it could be so important for you and your business. If you want help with SKU rationalization, we have an entire mini course on it that comes with its own template and spreadsheet for you to figure out how to sort your data. We also have spots open in our next case study where you can come into our annual membership, get personal attention from me and my entire team while you are working through these processes. Now, we do love to help startups. So if you are just starting out, this is a really good process for you to learn now so that as you grow and as you get your inventory in, you are setting things up the right way from the beginning. However, if you're 10 years into your business, that's actually our bread and butter. It is number one for us to be able to come into our clients who are making millions of dollars already and help them figure out how to make many more millions of dollars by doing some of these processes. So regardless of where you are in your journey, we also invite you to come into our next case study annual membership. You lock in your price forever. So if you decide to stay for 10 years, you lock in today's price for 10 years, even if we raise it over the next 10 years steadily. I also really recommend that you go out and get Barry Schwartz's book, The Paradox of Choice. I do not have an affiliate for that. I don't know Barry, but I think it's a great book. And I think it really emphasizes the difficulty that we all face on a regular basis in making all of these different choices in our lives and how, as a business owner, you can eliminate that for your target customer and make it so much easier to shop your stuff. If you liked this episode, I please ask that you share it with someone else who might also benefit from learning a little bit about SKU rationalization. Thank you so much for being here with me today. Like and subscribe if you're here with me on YouTube, and I will see you next week. Thank you so much for listening to the Business of Apparel podcast. I would so appreciate hearing your thoughts on the show. And if you know someone who could benefit from it, please share it with them. My biggest desire is to help other apparel professionals understand the nuances of our industry so we can all work toward making better product for a better world. If you would like to connect further, I'd love to invite you to send me a message through my website, thebusinessofapparel.com, where I do weekly trainings through my YouTube video channel, a weekly newsletter, blog articles, and so many more resources to help you start and scale a profitable apparel brand. This podcast is produced by Box 7 Media, who I cannot speak highly enough of. If you're looking to start your own podcast, you can reach out to Jeremy at Box 7 Media on LinkedIn anytime.